thought it was a very interesting topic that I was asked to speak on, Areligious Buddhism. And what it invokes is how is Buddhism being adopted or adapted into secular modern society. And this, has to do with the mindfulness movement, and then also with something called secular Buddhism. So I thought to speak a little bit about both of those and my take on them and what's happening. I should tell you first that, it's quite interesting. We talk about liberal and conservative and things like that. When I'm with my Tibetan teachers or with the Chinese Sangha and so on, they see me as being more liberal because I want to adapt certain things, or not adapt, I should say. I want to, for example, in Vinaya, really think of the purpose of the precepts, and even if we can't keep them literally perfect, to keep the purpose. Yeah. Whereas perhaps some of the Asians, monastics, want to keep it quite literally. So that's just an example. So, when I'm in Asia, even though my opinions don't change in Asia and America, but compared to the Asians, I tend to be on the liberal side. Compared to the Western Buddhists, I tend to be on the conservative side. So, are you liberal or are you conservative? Yeah, this is a good example of emptiness and mutual dependence, because it's all, determined in comparison to who. So, if we start out talking with the mindfulness movement, which is, spreading very much in schools, in the business world, all over, yeah. And therapists are using it to treat people with different psychological problems. I read that it's worked very good with people who have obsessive-compulsive disorder. And, in the business world, and, you had the conference Wisdom 2.0 here in Singapore in August, and some people were teaching mindfulness and talking about it here, and then, in schools they're teaching it. So people often ask me what I think, and my idea is that mindfulness in this kind of secular situation, taught to non-Buddhists in all walks of life, it's very good in the sense that it helps people. It helps them calm down, helps them to become more self-aware and so forth. However, we should not confuse that with Buddhist mindfulness. Yeah, they're two different things. And so people who teach mindfulness in a secular way, I don't think should consider themselves Buddhist teachers. Yeah, and I think it should be described, the mindfulness they teach, as something that has been adapted from Buddhism, but it's not strictly Buddhist mindfulness. Okay, and the reason I think the Buddhist mindfulness and mindfulness in a secular context should be separated for two reasons. One is, if we separate it out from Buddhism, then people from other faiths or people who have no religion at all feel very comfortable doing the secular mindfulness meditation, because it doesn't come with a worldview at all. It just is a technique. It's not a religious practice. It's a technique, not a worldview, not a path to liberation. It's just something to help people be calmer, deal with their stress, become more self-aware, and so on. Yeah, so it opens the door for non-religious people to practice mindfulness. A second reason I think the two should be differentiated is because we don't want people who are Buddhist, who are interested in attaining liberation, to think that what the therapists and teachers and Wall Street people are teaching is Buddhism, and that's all Buddhism has to offer. Because as we know, Buddhist practice is much deeper, much broader. It's placed within a whole worldview, and its aim is liberation. Its aim is nirvana. Yeah. Secular mindfulness, the aim is not nirvana. Okay? They don't want to even talk about nirvana, because it's in a totally secular way. So I think it's good to separate the two in that way, because then there's no confusion. Also, I think it's important as Buddhists that we know that what people are learning as secular mindfulness is one, it's basically bare observation. It's simply observing the thoughts in your mind, the sensations in your body. Buddhist mindfulness is not just bare observation. When we study the four foundations of mindfulness, or four establishments of mindfulness, on the body, feelings, mind, and phenomena, then mindfulness has a component of wisdom, because we're really trying to understand what is the body. We're not simply observing it and observing the sensations, but we're thinking, what is this body? And looking at what it's composed of, looking at what its cause it was, what its result is. Okay? And similarly, when we're meditating on feelings, we're not just observing, we're trying to understand. And it has an element of investigation and analysis so that we can understand what are our feelings, what are our minds, what are, all these phenomena that we're establishing mindfulness. Okay? So to do that meditation, you have to have a little bit of study beforehand, and to realize that the practice of the four establishments of mindfulness in a Buddhist context is very much linked with overcoming the four distortions. So the four distortions are seeing things that are impermanent as permanent, seeing things that are foul as pure and clean, seeing things that are in nature dukkha or unsatisfactory as being happiness, and seeing things that lack a self as having a self. So Buddhist mindfulness, you're really trying to understand body, feeling, mind, phenomena, and to overcome those four distortions and progress on the path to nirvana. In secular mindfulness, all of that's out of the picture. It's simply observe sensations, observe thoughts. Okay? So I think as Buddhists we need to be clear about this, and when people ask us about it, be able to explain the difference between secular mindfulness, Buddhist mindfulness. Okay? Is that clear? Yeah? Okay. Then having talked about that briefly, what I want to move into more is the thing of secular Buddhism, because the title of the talk was actually Areligious or non-religious Buddhism. Is there such a thing? Okay. So then the question arises, is Buddhism a religion? Okay. Then you have to ask, what is a religion? Now, some people define a religion as you have to have a supreme creator. So if you define religion as that, then clearly Buddhism isn't a religion. However, for me, I look at religion as a philosophical system that talks about what is our human situation and its predicament, what causes it, is there a state beyond our human predicament, and what is the path to get there. In other words, did you recognize what I just spoke of? Four Noble Truths. Okay? So every religion has its own version of the Four Noble Truths, how they describe our human situation and its causes and so forth. So, but especially I think religion is designed to help us go beyond our human situation, to think beyond just this lifetime. Yeah. Because this lifetime, they say it's like a flash of lightning. It doesn't last very long. So it may seem that it lasts long, but at the time we die, when we look back, our life seems to have gone like that. I remember when I was a little child, my parents saying, "Oh, the years go by so quickly." But I didn't believe them because it seemed like ages between one birthday and another birthday. And I liked birthdays because I got presents. But then, it's funny, as I grew older, I began to have the same perception as my parents, and time started going much quicker. So I think religion helps us ask ourselves, what is beyond this life? What is the purpose of our life? Yeah. How do we give ourselves, our lives, meaning? Is there a state that is free of the kind of suffering and dukkha that we have in our human life? And how do we get there? What is the nature of reality? Okay, so I think religion kind of brings together philosophy, soteriology, a path to salvation, and a practice of how we actually train our mind. So then the question comes, well, what about secular Buddhism? Does it do that? And how is secular Buddhism different from Buddhism? And I even wonder if it should be called Buddhism. I have that question. So I looked up secular Buddhism. I printed out some of the things I learned about it. I know Stephen Batchelor, he's kind of the head of the secular Buddhist movement. And I thought I would read some of the things about secular Buddhism. And then, because I'm conservative and traditional in comparison, to give some of my reflections about it. And like I said, is it really Buddhism? Is it necessary to call this Buddhism? Okay. So secular Buddhism is sometimes referred to as agnostic Buddhism or pragmatic Buddhism, Buddhist atheism. Okay, so there's a lot of different names. And it's an emerging form of Buddhism and secular spirituality that is based on humanistic, skeptical, and or agnostic values, okay, as well as pragmatism and often naturalism, rather than religious or more specifically supernatural or paranormal beliefs. Now here, I find it very interesting that supernormal things are considered religious. Yeah. Whereas, humanistic things are considered secular. my experience of the Dharma is, that the Dharma is very reasonable, very rational. Yeah. Now, some people, because it goes on here, okay? Yeah. So I'll come back to this. Secular Buddhists interpret the teachings of the Buddha and the Buddhist texts in a rationalist and often evidentialist manner, which means if I see it and there's evidence, I believe it. If I don't see it and I don't know of any evidence, I don't believe it. Okay? They consider the historical and cultural context of the times of the Buddha, of the times in which the Buddha lived, and when the various sutras and tantras were written. Okay, that's fair enough. But this thing of evidentialist, it's like I have to have the evidence. Now, what does evidence mean? Does it mean we have to see it with our senses? Does it mean that anything we can't know with our senses does not exist? That almost seems like what it's meaning, okay? Because it says, within the framework of secular Buddhism, Buddhist doctrine may be stripped of any unspecific combination of various traditional beliefs that could be considered superstitious or that can't be tested through empirical research, namely supernatural beings such as devas, bodhisattvas, nagas, pretas, buddhas. Okay, the idea of merit and dedicating merit, rebirth, Buddhist cosmology, including the existence of pure lands and hells, and so forth. Now, okay, first of all, I don't like all this being called superstitious. Yeah? Because something like rebirth, for example, if you understand reasoning very well, there is a reasoning that can prove rebirth. Rebirth is not superstitious. Yeah. It can be validated through reasoning. It can also be validated by talking to people who remember their previous lives. Yeah. And also, when we think, even we can't remember our previous lives, I think rebirth can explain some of the questions that we may have about our life. Yeah. For example, how many of you are parents? How many of you have kids? Okay. When your kids were born, did they have personalities? Or were they all like a blank slate, all exactly the same? They were different, weren't they? Each kid, from day one, they had very different personalities, different tendencies, different likes and dislikes. Now somebody could say, well, you can explain that through genetics, but I don't think so. Because I think our personality, our character, is more than our genes. Our genes are just inanimate material. Our personality, our character, our emotions are formless. You can't equate the two. So when you have kids and they start out with personalities, very different ones, then it makes you think, why? Yeah. Those of you who are parents, did you ever wonder, you try and teach all your kids the same values, but one child believes in those values and the other child doesn't? Why? Okay? So I think rebirth here can be something used to explain these kind of situations. Yeah? For example, I look at the family I was born into. Yeah? It was a Jewish family, not religious, very scientific. Yeah? 3 kids, we all had extremely different personalities. Yeah? And I wound up as a Buddhist. And as my parents remind me, they're genealogically and in terms of my genes, there are no Buddhists in my lineage. Yeah? In terms, so when we talk about nature and nurture, nature, cancel it out. There's no Buddhists. Grandparents, great-grandparents, I don't care how far you go back. None of them were Buddhists. Okay? What about nurture, the environment around you? I grew up in a Christian-based community, middle-class community in America. How in the world did I become a Buddhist? Yeah? It wasn't what I was taught in school. It wasn't what I was taught at home. I didn't hang around with a bunch of Buddhist kids because there weren't any at my school. Yeah? Now how do you explain how I became a Buddhist? There must have been some other kind of causes. Okay? Like karma from previous lives, some kind of contact or familiarity, from a previous life that made me attracted to Buddhism in this life. Otherwise, why? And you can't say, oh, it's just random, because we all know that everything has causes. Okay? So I don't think that it's really fair. I know a number of people, they don't feel comfortable believing in rebirth because they haven't understood it. But to say it doesn't exist because I can't see it, or it doesn't exist because I don't feel comfortable with it, that is not a good reason. Okay? So I think the way the secular Buddhist movement is questioning rebirth, some people even going so far as to say the Buddha didn't teach it. That it was just part of Indian culture at the time. Yes, it was part of Indian culture at the time, but the Buddha definitely taught rebirth. And the Indian sages that followed him, that wrote commentaries and treatises, all explained rebirth and the reasoning that lies behind it. Yeah? So I don't think it's fair to throw that out. Yeah? Similarly, karma. Yeah? Karma simply means that our actions have an ethical dimension, that our actions bear results, not only in the immediate future, but even long term. To me, karma is simply a system of cause and effect that works on a psychological level. Yeah. To say that I can't see every single exact cause and understand it, therefore there's no such thing as the law of karma and its effects, I think that would be rather arrogant. Okay? Also, if people say they're practicing Buddhism, but they don't believe in karma, and they don't believe in rebirth, and they don't believe in nirvana, because you also can't see nirvana, then why call it Buddhism? if you're just practicing something that benefits you in this lifetime, and I think, as I understood from the article I read, people want to live an ethical life and they're learning ethics from the Buddhist sutras. That's fine, that's wonderful. Learn about ethics, learn about compassion, forgiveness, ways to transform your emotions. Yeah, practice that. You can be a Catholic, you can be a Muslim, you can be a Jew, you can be a Buddhist. Those kind of things are like open to everybody, and you don't need any kind of worldview, to develop just regular compassion, for example. So if that's what you want to do, why call yourself a Buddhist? What's Buddhist about what you're doing? Are you getting what I'm saying here? Yeah? So I'm getting the feeling through what I read, it's like people like elements of Buddhism, but they don't want to accept all of it. They want to pick and choose, but they still want to call it Buddhism. And I'm saying, well, don't call it Buddhism. Call it whatever you want to. But if you're taking out some of the basic beliefs upon which the Four Noble Truths are based, and you're not accepting the Four Noble Truths, which are the foundation of the Buddhist teachings, then why call it Buddhism? Call it something else. Okay? That's my view. Yeah? And, when I started out too, when they talked about hell realms and heavenly realms and all these kinds of things, I didn't quite believe it either. I mean, I had to believe in the animal realm because they were there. I could see those. Yeah. Other realms, I was going, do they really exist? I'm not so sure. But as I've, hung around a bit longer, it's made much more sense to me, when I think about karma and how our mental states create our experience, and how I don't see the realms as simply mental states in a human body, because it seems to me that our mental states can create a different situation in which we live in the next life. Yeah? So I believe in rebirth. I believe in these different realms. Yeah? And I suppose, because they say when you develop very high levels of jhana, of meditative concentration, that then you have the ability to remember at least some of your previous lives. So that, I have faith, I can't verify it, but it makes sense to me. And I think someday when I learn to concentrate, then I'll have the actual experience. So I don't want to throw out anything simply because I don't see it right now. Yeah, I think that can be dangerous. There's lots of things that I don't understand. I put them on the back burner. Or I interpret them in a slightly different way. Because here it was I was talking with somebody yesterday, and he was talking about Buddhism stripped of all the hocus pocus. That was the word he used. Yeah, hocus pocus. So I wonder, what is Buddhist hocus pocus? Yeah. So what comes to my mind is, they say that when the Buddha was born, he was born from his mother's side, and then he stood up and he walked 7 steps and said, "This is my last rebirth." Okay. So that's kind of a supernormal thing, don't you think? I haven't seen any other babies do that. Yeah? And babies usually can't stand up and walk, and they usually don't come out of their mother's side. But does my belief in Buddhism depend upon my believing that? No. Yeah. I think that's more, some of my teachers may believe that is literal. I look at that more as a legend or a metaphor. In any case, whether it's true or not true, my faith in the Buddha Dharma does not depend on that. Yeah. Why? Because if it were supernatural, miraculous things that inspired my faith, I could have stayed Jewish. There was certainly enough there. I mean, you had the whole Red Sea that split open. Yeah? And you had the burning bush. I mean, there was plenty of magic there. That did not inspire my faith at all. Yeah. So I don't think faith in these kinds of stories and so forth is what, for me anyway, what makes me a Buddhist. Like I said, if I liked that stuff, I would have stayed my own religion. Yeah, but all that stuff doesn't mean much to me. My faith in the Dharma is based on studying the scriptures and using reasoning. That's what His Holiness Dalai Lama encourages us to do. He says, study, learn, investigate, analyze, think about it. Don't just have blind belief. Okay. Now, some of you may say, but what about Tantra? You have all these deities and you have mandalas and things are emanating and absorbing, and you say all these mantras, and you read one Tantra and it says, if you say this mantra 10 times, you will be born in the Pure Land. Do you really believe that? Yeah. I asked Dalai Lama about that one time, all these things like, if you say this mantra, you'll be born in the Pure Land. If you say that mantra once, you'll never be born in the hells again. I said, is this true? I said, I have a really hard time with these statements. And His Holiness said, if those statements were literally true, why did the Buddha spend 45 years teaching the Dharma? He would have only taught that mantra, and that was it. Yeah? If saying Namo Amitofo 10 times gets you to the Pure Land, Buddha would not have spent 45 years going here, going there, talking to all these different people, using reasoning, using logic, debating things, explaining things. He would have just said, Namo Amitofo, Namo Amitofo. Okay, Pure Land, that's it. Yeah. But you need much more than saying Namo Amitofo 10 times to get to the Pure Land. Yeah, those are not statements that should be taken literally. Okay? Yeah. If you say Namo Amitofo 10 times with an awareness of selflessness and serenity combined with insight, then that might get you Pure Land. But first you have to have the serenity and insight. And to have serenity and insight, you have to keep ethical conduct and develop concentration. And you have to have the bodhicitta, the altruistic intention, for that to get you also to the Pure Land. So, to me, the fact that some statements are made and they can't be taken literally does not mean that they're hocus pocus and I should throw them out. Now somebody might say, well, why do they teach then that if you say Namo Amitofo 10 times, you get to the Pure Land. Or, you know, most people don't say it quite. They say more than 10 times, you know. But you have to keep it in mind, you know, day in and day out, and, you know, do that. Why do they teach that if you also need ethical conduct and bodhicitta and understanding of selflessness and so forth? I think because at certain times in history, people were, the social climate was very poor. There was a lot of war, a lot of strife. People really needed to believe in something beyond this life that gave them energy, that could pacify their mind and keep their mind stable in the midst of living in a very chaotic society. So I think some masters, out of compassion, explained part of the Pure Land practice to help those people, most of whom were illiterate and could not study the sutras. But those same masters, to their students who were more sincere, who were educated, who were literate, then they taught them the sutras, and they taught them how to generate shamatha and vipassana, how to have renunciation of samsara, and so on. So masters teach different things according to the student's disposition and according to the need of the student. So they simplify some things for people when that's going to be what benefits those people. So that's one thing where I differ from the secular Buddhism. Then it says, traditional Buddhist ethics, such as conservative views, already judgmental, regarding abortion and human sexuality may or may not be called into question as well. Some schools, especially Western Buddhist ones, take more progressive stances regarding social issues. Okay, so how about abortion? Is it fair to question abortion? Yesterday, I had a very interesting discussion with one young man about capital punishment and the death penalty. He's Buddhist, long time been Buddhist, and he thinks the death penalty, or at least the beginning of the discussion, he thought the death penalty could be valid. At the end of the discussion, I think he may have changed his mind. Don't you think so? I'm often very surprised at the Singapore Buddhist community, how people just automatically, because you have the death penalty in this country, say, yes, death penalty's fine. What about the first precept? What is the first precept? To abandon killing. Is capital punishment killing? It's killing, isn't it? It's government authorized murder. Isn't it? I mean, in my country too, they have capital punishment. So I won't talk about Singapore, I'll talk about my country. Okay, my country is government authorized murder. Now, is it fair, and to murder somebody for a non-violent crime? Like drug dealing is not a violent crime. It's a non-violent crime. You murder somebody for a non-violent crime. hard time with that. Yeah? And I've worked with inmates, and one of the men I worked with was executed. See, they have when the government does it, they have nice words like execute. Yeah. But bluntly, it's murder. Okay. So don't we as Buddhists need to think about this? Yeah. What about abortion? You know, this is a real sticky issue in my country because many people believe, you know, the progressive people who are the people who tend to be Buddhist, you know, they believe in abortion. And yet it's very clear from the first precept that abortion is also killing. Isn't it? And so I've thought a great deal about it, you know. Being a woman, I understand the argument that women should have control over their own bodies, that the government shouldn't make you have a baby if you don't want to. And especially in my country, you know, the whole abortion debate is, I mean, it's violent. You may have read about the mass shooting in Colorado a couple of weeks ago, you know, in front of Planned Parenthood. So it's become a violent issue, which is really like way off base. But you know, as a Buddhist, I can't say abortion's okay. Even though I tend to be very liberal on many other social issues, I can't say it's okay. You know, I do think that it shouldn't be criminalized. Yeah? That people should leave it to people to think for themselves. I don't think they should be put in prison for it, but I do consider it killing. And then people say to me, well, what do you do in the case of unwanted pregnancy? Okay. Well, my little sister is adopted. I always wanted a little sister. I got a little brother instead. He's okay. But I really wanted a sister. And then my parents adopted my sister. And I am so grateful to her birth mother for not having an abortion, but for having the child and giving the child up for adoption. Yeah? So that's the way I would kind of try and handle those issues. Yeah? So, you know, I feel it's important to stick by the ethics that the Buddha gave us. In Singapore, people often come up to me, I'm telling you this so you don't do it after this class. But they always come up to me, what about spraying for insects, La? Yeah? Shouldn't we spray for insects? How about the termites? What do we do? Yeah. As if they're asking me to give them absolution. Yes. My dear, you may kill the insects. It is karma-free activity because I said so. This is what they want me to say, you know. I bless you to kill insects. You know, I'm not going to say that. Yeah, killing insects is killing insects. Then they're going to say to me, but you don't understand. I understand very well. I live in a rural area. We have plenty of insects. We have carpenter ants that were living in our ceiling. We have carpenter ants living in one of our cabins. We had ants all over the house one year. Yeah, especially when one nun, I won't mention her name, decided to feed them and left the honey out. And her idea was all the ants would come to the honey and then we would take them out. Well, the ants came to the honey and then they told their friends and their friends came to the honey. And pretty soon we had a lot of very happy ants at our tea counter. So we changed that policy very quickly. But I understand very well what it's like to not kill insects. Yeah? We have wasps and hornets and yellow jackets. Yeah? And so we have a little program where we go around all the buildings, we knock down their nests before they can, build them. Yeah? So we find ways to help the insects live happily ever after somewhere else. Okay? Okay, shall we go on with this? Yeah, secular Buddhism. Okay. Okay, so another thing that they want to do is to abandon the hierarchical features of the Buddhist monastic culture in favor of democratic principles of civic association. In particular, the need to include women on an equal footing produced organizational innovations which disrupted older patterns of patriarchal authority and gender exclusivity. They use a lot of big words here. What it means, okay, so there's two issues here. One issue is gender equality. One issue is hierarchy. And the third issue is monasticism. Okay, so secular Buddhism is calling all three of those into question. Yeah. So let's start with the hierarchy. They often see the monastic system as very hierarchical. The Sangha is up here, the lay people are down here. The teachers are up here, the common practitioners are down here. And they, instead of having an abbot of a monastery or a leader in a Dharma center, they want everything to be democratic. Yeah, one person, one vote. Now, I'm all for democracy. However, I think there is a role for hierarchy. And I think especially in spiritual training, that hierarchy is important. Okay? I am not equal to my Dharma teachers. Yeah. I am not equal to them. If I were equal to them, why would they be my teachers? Yeah. I want to attain the same realizations of my teachers, but I don't want to be equal to them on a secular level, because I think it's helpful for me to express respect to my teachers. And I think it's helpful for me to bow to the Buddha and to bow to my teachers. Yeah. I don't want to take away all the hierarchy where I'm equal to people who are in fact superior than me. Because if I have that attitude, how am I going to learn from my teachers? Yeah. And isn't that attitude a little bit arrogant? Yeah. Then also, this idea everybody has to be equal. When I first lived in a monastery in France, this was in the 1980s, all of us were very equal. So we had some people that had been ordained for longer, several years, some people who were brand new. Everybody had equal vote. It didn't work. Why? Because when you're brand new, you don't understand what the Dharma is about. You don't understand what monastic life is about. You don't understand what training your mind entails. So when you're brand new, you want to make rules that fit with what you like to do, like sleep late and have short meditation sessions and go shopping. But if you really want to train your mind, you need to follow the guidance that the Buddha set up and follow the guidance of teachers who have trained their mind and who set up a certain kind of discipline for you to follow so that you can also train your mind. And as new people, we don't know how to train our mind. And if we want to get rid of all hierarchy and everybody votes on everything, how are we going to learn? And from who are we going to learn? And I think it increases our arrogance in that way. Okay? So I think it's very important the way we do it at the Abbey. Everybody offers their opinion because everybody can have good ideas. We listen to everybody's opinion. But the decisions are made by the people who are older in ordination, who understand what monastic life is about. Okay? Then the second one, gender equality. Okay, that one I think is important. Yeah. Tomorrow night I'm going to be giving a talk on 21st century Buddhism, because His Holiness Dalai Lama talks about we've got to be 21st century Buddhists. So one of the things I think that involves is gender equality. Okay. Why? Because women are half of the human race, and women can attain realizations. So shouldn't the playing field be level so that women can use their potential? Because after all, the Buddha taught the Dharma so that all sentient beings can attain enlightenment, not just so that men can attain enlightenment. Yeah. The Buddha said he wanted the fourfold Sangha, bhikshus, bhikshunis, upasikas, upasakas, so both male and female monastics and lay followers. So I think gender equality is quite important, and I also think it's in line with what the Buddha taught. Okay? Because he really didn't teach, only half of sentient beings can become enlightened. I don't find that anywhere in the scriptures. Okay, so that one I'm with the secular Buddhists on. Then also, a lot of the secular Buddhists, they say monasticism is old-fashioned. Yeah, their main things is hierarchical, which I just spoke about, and it's patriarchal, which I also just spoke about. But they also say it's old-fashioned. Why do we need to have monastics? Yeah? It's a good question. Why do we need monastics? Why do you think we need monastics? Should we just disband all the monasteries? Yeah? What do you think? Bunty is your teacher. Yeah? What would you think if Bunty was a layperson? Would that have the same effect on you? Yeah? Let me tell you one thing. If I were a layperson, I wouldn't be able to be here teaching you right now. Why? Because if I were married and I had kids, my family wants me at home. Yeah? I would be tied to my family. I would not have the freedom to be able to come here and teach in Singapore. Yeah. I would also have to go work for a living. Yeah. Which means I wouldn't have so much time to study and so much time to practice, so much time to contemplate the Dharma. So that means that if I did get here, or actually you would have to come to where I live, then the level of teachings you got would be much lower, because the level of my practice and knowledge would be much lower. Okay? Also, if I were a lay person, what do you think? Maybe I'm married, but there's also a couple of you guys out there pretty good looking. Yeah? What about that? What does that do to the teacher-student relationship? And then maybe, you're in crisis, you want some advice. Your Dharma teacher is a lay person, then you have to call them up, and say, I'm troubled, I really need some help. And then their husband and wife says, why are you answering those calls from those people? You got to stay home and be with your family. You've got to go to work to earn more money for the family. If your teachers were not monastics, if they were all lay people, and they were going to support their families based on teaching, let's say they didn't have an outside job, all they did was teaching, that means that they would teach only in the places where the people gave them more donations. Because they would have to get a lot of money, because they have their whole family to support. Are you getting what I'm saying? So that means that if I had kids, you would have to donate money so that I could buy Nike shoes for my children. And so that I could buy popcorn for my children. Is that fair? Do you want to donate monies for that? I mean, now if you donate, it goes to a monastery where people are practicing the Dharma. But if all your teachers are lay people, then you have to support their middle-class lifestyle. So your dana goes for my car insurance. It goes so my kids can go to summer camp. What do you think about that? Becomes difficult. And then, if I were a lay person and I had to support my family, then, certain places I go, people don't give very much dana. Well, I would have to stop going there, because I could only go to places where people could give me a lot. Or I would have to start charging for teachings, which many people do. And I don't think that's right to charge for Dharma teachings. Okay? So I think monastic life is very important. Not only because it gives you the opportunity to really train and study and practice, because it frees you from other obligations. But it also gives you so much freedom to be able to share the Dharma with other people. Instead of, my phone ringing and oh, Susie's sick, you better come home, she has a fever. Okay, let's dedicate the merit, I gotta go take care of Susie. Where's that gonna leave you? Or you come over to see me and I'm sitting there with the baby, Oh, sorry, I can't talk about Dharma with you. I have to change the diaper and feed the baby and, drive them to soccer practice. And okay? So I think monastic life has a very important role to play in the preservation and the spread of the Buddha Dharma. And I think, secular Buddhism questioning its role is not so smart. Okay. I'm not saying all monastics are superior to lay people. I'm not saying that. Because one thing that I will talk about tomorrow in 21st century Buddhism is that the lay people now really are studying and practicing much more than in previous centuries. And I think that's really, really good. In previous centuries, all people were interested in is making merit. Now you want to learn and practice, and that's really wonderful. Okay, let's see what else secular Buddhism has to say for itself. Okay. Secular Buddhism is founded on a reconfiguration of core elements of the Dharma itself. If you're reconfiguring core elements of the Dharma itself, why are you calling it Buddhism? Call it something else. Okay? So it seeks to recover the original teachings of Siddhartha Gautama, the historical Buddha, yet without claiming to disclose what the Buddha really meant. Rather, it interprets the early canonical teachings in a way that draws out their meaning in the Buddha's own historical context, while demonstrating their value and relevance to people living in our own time. That's fine. See, the teachings in a historical context show their relevance now. That's fine. Yeah. But saying that the Buddha didn't teach certain things that he did teach, yeah, or saying that there are no such things as rebirth or cyclic existence or bodhisattvas or even Buddhas. If you say those things don't exist, then what are you practicing? Yeah, you can practice ethical conduct, you can practice love and compassion. But what's your ultimate goal? Then your ultimate goal is just something in this life. Then eliminating suffering means only eliminating the suffering of this life. Is that sufficient? Yeah. Eliminating the suffering of this life, that's important. It's very important that we eliminate it. However, we're never going to be able to completely eliminate everybody's suffering of this life unless we free them from samsara. Because as long as we take rebirth under the influence of ignorance, anger, and attachment, there's going to be suffering. Yeah? So if we abandon the goal of overcoming ignorance, anger, and attachment, if we no longer have that as a purpose of our spiritual practice, then we're going to keep being born in samsara again and again and again. Okay. Now, somebody could say, but those people don't believe that you get born again, because they don't believe in rebirth either. Yeah? So then the whole purpose of your spiritual practice becomes the happiness of this life. Isn't that what we're already doing as confused samsaric beings? Is seeking the happiness of this life? And if there's no state of happiness that is greater than the happiness of this life, because there's no other realms, there's no pure lands, there's no such things as Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and Arhats, that means the greatest level of happiness we could ever have is the happiness of this life. Is the purpose of your life the happiness of this life? the happiness of this life comes and goes like this. It has no lasting benefit. Yeah. What spiritual practice do you have left if you're not seeking to transcend our human limitations and develop qualities that we don't already have that will prevent us from having the dukkha and suffering that is in our lives right now? And if there's no such thing as other realms or arhatship, Buddhahood, and so on, that means that if somebody is suffering in this life, the best way for them to stop suffering is to die. That means everybody should think death was wonderful, because that's the cessation of suffering. Is that ridiculous, or is that ridiculous? I mean, come on. Yeah, but it's the only logical argument that follows if you say that none of those other things exist. Then if you're suffering this life, death is your liberation. How many people look forward to dying and see death as liberation? Okay, in adopting this, secular Buddhism proposes that we leave behind the metaphysical beliefs and soteriology of Indian religious culture. Soteriology means the path to liberation. This culture saw human life as an irredeemable realm of suffering from which one should seek transcendence in an enduring beyond human condition, a stance that virtually all Buddhist schools, as well as Hinduism and Jainism, perpetuate. Secular Buddhism, on the other hand, seeks to deploy the Buddha's teachings as a guide to full human flourishing in this life and this world. In adopting this post-metaphysical position, it parts company with existing religious forms of Buddhist orthodoxy, which have evolved since the Buddha's death. Instead, it aligns itself with today's post-metaphysical philosophy, so finds itself on a convergent path with similar movements in Christian thought. So, who's your teacher? If you abandon all Buddhist philosophy, yeah? You abandon all Buddhist philosophy? You abandon the path to enlightenment because you say none of that exists? Then, I don't know. What are you doing? Yeah? I mean, I really don't get it. Now, having said this, and I'll talk more about this tomorrow night, His Holiness Dalai Lama says that Buddhism does have kind of three facets. What he calls Buddhist science, Buddhist philosophy, and Buddhist practice. Okay, so Buddhist science, he says, is like the science of mind. What is the mind? What are mental factors? How does our mind function? Okay, and there's also, the Buddhist physical science. They talk of space particles and things like that. Anyway, then Buddhist philosophy. Nagarjuna, the Buddha himself, the philosophy of emptiness, of selflessness. That's very precious. And then Buddhist practice, which is aimed at attaining nirvana, or Buddhahood. So he says that people who are not Buddhists, learn Buddhist science, learn about the mind, the mental factors. That can be very helpful to you, and you don't have to believe in anything more. Or some people are interested in Buddhist philosophy. You have lots of people in academia interested in Buddhist philosophy. And that's fine, and that benefits them. But he says, but Buddhist practice, that's for us Buddhists. Yeah. But you know what? It seems to me that studying Buddhist science, like the mind and mental factors, and studying Buddhist philosophy, but without having the Buddhist worldview or the wish to do Buddhist practice and the wish to attain nirvana and Buddhahood, if you don't have that, then the outcomes of what you're doing are going to be very different. Yeah? So it's kind of like people nowadays, you know, if you do, like there's a whole movement, lots of people like to do Zen meditation. But if you do Zen meditation and you're divorced from the Buddhist worldview, your meditation is going to have different outcomes than if you believe, you know, that ignorance is the source of our suffering and that we have to overcome it. Yeah, you're going to come up with very different outcomes. Yeah? So you can study, you know, the philosophy of emptiness, but if you don't have any real urge to practice, then how much are you really going to understand emptiness? Maybe it's just going to be some kind of, you know, intellectually curious thing, you know, that you don't really apply to your life. And actually, I saw an example of it. You know, if you're somebody who really wants to practice Buddhist philosophy, it's going to impact how you live your life. So, for example, one way it impacts is how you think of death. Yeah? Because if you believe in emptiness, how you think of death and the death of your beloved ones and how you grieve is very different than if you don't practice emptiness. Okay? And you can see the difference between people who know Buddhism academically as an intellectual thing and people who know about emptiness, I should say, academically, intellectually, and people who know about emptiness but try and practice it. There's very big differences, for example, in how they grieve the deaths of their dear ones, how they look at death to start with, how they look at their reputation and the value of reputation. There's a lot of differences here. Yeah? So my point is, if you take away, you know, the idea of nirvana and you take away, you know, the practices to attain it, then you're losing so much of the transformative power of the Buddhist teachings. Anyway, I've talked enough. I won't go through all the rest of this stuff, but I want to open it up and have you ask questions and make comments, because surely you have some thoughts about this by now. Or I should say, hopefully you have some thoughts about it. Because if you don't have some thoughts about it, then I didn't give a very good talk. So, yes?
Venerable, what is your reflection on euthanasia and mercy killing?
On euthanasia and mercy killing. Okay, whoops. I think that life is valuable even if we're suffering. Yeah. So I know the question, let's talk about with animals first of all. This question came up in terms of animals. We asked my teacher, and he said, if you know exactly where the animal is going to be reborn, and you know that it's going to be in a better life, then yes, it's okay to mercy kill, because it'll go on to a happier life with less suffering. But if you don't know for sure where somebody's going to be reborn, they could actually wind up with more suffering. Okay, that's one factor. Second factor is, I think, it's hard for people who don't know the Dharma to make their lives meaningful when they're sick. But if you know the Dharma, then even if you're sick, even if you're terminally ill, even if you're in pain, you can make your life highly meaningful, do a lot of purification, do a lot of creation of merit, progress along the path, understand emptiness and compassion much better, even if you're just lying in bed. Yeah, your life still has meaning. So I always find it a tragedy when people feel that their life has no meaning and, they mercy killing, and they want that. I feel like it makes me so sad, like, wow, if only I could help that person understand the incredible value and meaning of their human life. Then they wouldn't feel so depressed. Yes?
I think that no particular organization or religious group has the absolute truth.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not saying that there's no absolute truth, there is an absolute truth. So each religious organization, because they are human, is only practicing maybe a percentage of the absolute truth, including Buddhism. So what I'm trying to suggest is that this world can consist of multiple religious groups and coexist, and each practices their own way of what life should be, because they don't have the absolute truth. But there is an absolute truth. So in this way, then the world has continued to exist, because if Buddhism has got the absolute truth, and eventually if all of us are fixed to be Buddhists on this world, then I'm saying that this world cannot sustain itself with all Buddhists practicing Buddhism. That's another question, but
Okay. So for the people who couldn't hear him, he's saying that there's many religions, each one of them knows a little bit of the truth. There is an ultimate truth, but nobody has it. And he's saying even if Buddhism did have it, then the world could not continue, because I guess everybody would attain nirvana. And that would be a big problem, wouldn't it? Everybody's free of suffering in this world. What a problem we have. People ask me that sometimes. They say the same thing about monastic life. If everybody became a monastic, then what's going to happen to the world? And I always say, let's worry about that when that happens. I don't see everybody becoming celibate anytime soon. Yeah? And similar, I don't see this dilemma happening anytime soon. What I do see is people who are highly spiritually realized. And this is another question I have for the secular Buddhist. Who is your role model? Is there a human being alive today that is your role model for what you want to become? Yeah. I know many spiritually highly advanced people. Yeah. I want to become like them. They're my role models. And I think that they do know the truth. Okay? And that Buddhism, in its teaching of the truth, says don't believe it just because the Buddha said it. You think about it. You analyze, you investigate it, you test it. You don't just believe. And I think that's one of the beauties of the Buddhist teachings. Yeah?
There is still a prevailing view that when we talk about a religion, that it contains this element called God. And some people want to refer to Buddhism as a philosophy or as a humanistic philosophy. What is your response to this idea of when somebody describes Buddhism as either a philosophy or humanistic philosophy? What would your response be? Would you accept that description?
Okay, so if somebody says Buddhism is just a philosophy or a humanistic philosophy, because they say that to have a religion you need to have a God.
Yeah, because philosophy in the broader sense is also the investigation and understanding of ultimate reality.
Yes,
or
definitely.
ultimate meaning for people.
Yeah.
So in that context of
Yeah.
the definition of philosophy.
Okay, so if you define religion as a belief in a God, then clearly Buddhism is not a religion. Yeah, then clearly Buddhism would be a philosophy or a psychology or a way of life. However, I think I have a different definition of religion. I don't think you have to have a God in order for it to be religion. But this is just terminology. Depends on how you want to define the word religion. Some people like the word religion, they define it that way. Some people don't like the word religion, they define it another way. Okay, but if we look at the meaning, Buddhism definitely is a philosophy, it's a way of life, it's a practice. Okay. Oh, one other thing I should mention, okay, that the secular Buddhists often don't like Buddhist institutions. And I think that part of the reason maybe that they want to start the secular Buddhist movement is because they don't like institutionalized religion. Okay? To tell you the truth, I don't like institutionalized religion either. Yeah. Even though some people look at me and because I wear these clothes say, but you're part of institutionalized religion. I am not part of institutionalized religion. Okay? In my mind, yeah, the Buddha's, whether you call it religion or philosophy, I don't care. The Buddha's path to liberation, let's call it that, okay? The Buddha's path to liberation and institutionalized religion or institutionalized Buddhism are two totally different things. Yeah? I'm interested in the path to liberation. I'm not interested, I think Buddhist institutions, they exist, they're needed, but they're only needed insofar as they help us maintain the practice and the philosophy and the way of life. Religious institutions are not an end to themselves. You can have very high status in a religious institution and be born in the lower realms afterwards because you create so much negative karma. So status in a religious institution and your spiritual state are very different. Yeah, I don't think we should confuse those. Okay? Yeah. You have to talk loudly.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, when you talk real loud, I can hear you.
There are some spiritual teachers like Eckhart Tolle and David Ryan who do not identify themselves as Buddhists, but they talk a lot about how to cultivate yourself spiritually.
How to
Cultivate yourself spiritually.
how
Cultivate yourself.
how to cultivate yourself spiritually. Okay.
So is there anything we should look out for when we read books by spiritual teachers who don't identify themselves as Buddhists? But they find, personally as a reader,
Well, I think if you're looking at those things, you should really see to what extent they correlate with what the Buddha said. Okay? And so, because there can be a lot of things, there's a lot of self-help books, and they're very good, and they're not contradictory to Buddhism, but they are self-help books. And so they will help you, but they won't lead you to liberation. Okay? So in the same way that, Buddhists take vitamins because it helps you, Buddhists can go to counselors, Buddhists can use self-help books, yeah? But you need to always recognize, to really recognize that if your ultimate aim is liberation and Buddhahood, or if your ultimate aim is impartial love and compassion for all beings, and bodhicitta, that those books or things may help you in a certain way to clear away certain obstacles you have, but they may not have the full teaching that can lead you to actualize all your spiritual aims. But if they help you, let's say with your anger, or they help you have more self-confidence, that's fine. Yeah, no problem with that. Okay. And I didn't recognize the names of the people you mentioned, so I'm not commenting on their work specifically and saying this. Yeah.
At what point does a fetus become a sentient being? At the point of conception itself?
Yeah, at what point does the fetus become a sentient being? Well, before there were things like in vitro fertilization, it used to be real clear. Yeah? It was at the time of conception. Yeah? Or at least that's how it was broached. So it could, on the other hand, maybe you could say it was at the time, because it becomes a sentient being when the consciousness enters into the fertilized egg. Okay, so does that happen before the egg plant is implanted in the mother's womb, or after it's implanted? You need psychic powers to know that. I can't tell you. Okay? But it is an interesting thing with in vitro fertilization. Does that mean that, those are living beings and that are then frozen until, they're implanted in someone's womb? Or does the consciousness only enter after they're defrosted and maybe implanted in the side of the womb? I don't know. Yeah, but it's definitely before birth. Okay. Yeah.
I'm curious about cloning.
How does Buddhism view cloning? Okay. Well, if I have my clone here, okay, I've suddenly manifested a clone, or the scientists have cloned me. And that is a living, talking being that is a different continuity of mind stream than me. Then what right do I have to say, can I have your liver? I mean, it's an interesting scientific experiment, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, But if it is, if it will have a different consciousness in it, then the idea of cloning so that you have some spare parts, yeah, when your parts fail, that's not going to work. Because maybe your clone's going to say to you, can I have your liver? And then what are you going to do? Wait a minute, you're supposed to give me your liver. I'm not going to give you my liver. Yeah. Okay. So that seems to be the reason to clone for that. So I don't think that reason is so valid. But in terms of you want to produce another human being that way, I don't know, that's fine. Yeah. Do you think I'm so beautiful you want to have two of me? Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I have friends who are Christian from the Abbey.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of when my child was having what's your view of the God? And then I'm sorry, how do you suggest that I should keep my Christian life?
Okay.
I don't know whether I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah. Okay, so my view on the Christian God, it doesn't make any sense to me. Okay? For some people, it provides solace, it gives them a reason to keep ethical conduct and to be a good human being. And if that philosophy or theology helps them to be a good human being, that's good. You know? And I value that. I'm not saying everybody has to become a Buddhist. However, for me, the whole idea of a creator God, it makes absolutely no sense. First of all, is God permanent or impermanent? Okay? If God is permanent, then that means God doesn't change. So how does God create? Because creation involves change. If God is impermanent and changes, then who created God? And where did God come from? Okay. If God created the world, why did he create suffering? This is where they get really stuck. They can't answer that question. And they say it's a mystery. That's true. It's a big mystery. If you are omnipotent and you're a creator, you're all-powerful, why do you create suffering? Yeah, they give an answer. Well, so that we can learn. Then why didn't God create us smarter so we didn't have to suffer? And also, I don't see many people learning from their suffering.
Religious belief. You cannot use reasoning to figure out what it is. Because religion is about belief.
No.
You have to believe or don't believe. That's it.
No. Well, that's what they say. You either believe or don't believe. You need to believe. Why do I need to believe something that doesn't make any sense?
What religion is about. You either believe or you don't.
But you see,
then you cannot be religious.
but this is the beauty of the Buddha's teaching, is the Buddha tells you, don't believe blindly. Think about it, question it, find answers that satisfy you. This is why Buddhism is so unique, because we are regarded as intelligent human beings who can think for ourselves and examine and see if things make sense. If we're told just shut up and believe, then which of the 5 million people who have their own religion and are telling me to shut up and believe, which one of them do I believe? Yeah? Because they all have different philosophies, and they all tell you don't think, just believe. Then which one do I believe? I have no criteria to decide. And then, I mean, it really, it makes no sense. You see a child die. And I mean, this happened in the community where we live. There was a child who died. And, the people were Christian. And they said to his friends, God took him to heaven. This was God's will. And the kid said, well, then I don't like God. Smart kid. Why is it God's will? It's a mystery. God's will is a mystery. You're left with this, everything's a mystery business. To me, it doesn't satisfy me spiritually. Like I said, for some people it works, it helps them become good people. Very good. I'm not going to debate with them. I'm just going to let them do, because I think that it's good that there's many religions so everybody can find something that makes sense to them. But a belief in a creator God makes no sense to me. Yeah?
Sorry. Yeah, I just raised my question.
Uh-huh.
What is my speech?
Okay.
My understanding of religion is that people rank the God realm. Am I right? Based on
Oh, in Buddhism we talk of a celestial realm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So is this Christian God, this Christian religion, one of the gods that
Okay. I don't believe the Christian God even exists, to tell you the truth. Yeah? That's my personal belief. If somebody thinks the Christian God exists, then yeah, I would place him in the Buddhist, God realm together with Brahma and Indra and all those guys. But the description of the theistic God, when I look at it with anger, I can't, not with anger, with reasoning. Oops. When I look at it with reasoning, I cannot establish the existence of that kind of God. Okay? Now, in terms of how you should treat your Christian friends, I treat my Christian friends, warmly. I'm polite. I'm respectful. But I will not tolerate anybody trying to preach at me or convert me. And if somebody tries to do that, I say, because it's so funny. We'll have sometimes people come up to the Abbey. I mean, we're a Buddhist monastery. A Buddhist monastery. And like they want to share the good news with us. and I say to them, and this is what I say, if you follow Jesus's teachings on love and compassion and kindness, you will have a much better life. If you keep good ethical conduct, you will have a good life. So please practice those. Thank you very much. Bye. And they're very happy with that. Yeah? Because I acknowledge what I believe. It will make them better people. But please, I don't want to hear this. I'm a Buddhist. I know what I believe. Yeah? I will happily, at the Abbey, we have interfaith dialogue, and we talk with people from other religions, and we have a very good relationship with some Catholic nuns. Yeah? But we don't try and convert each other. So I will talk with people about religion if it's in a mutually with mutual respect. If somebody's trying to convert me, I immediately stop the conversation. And in fact, I was on an airplane once, I wind up sitting next to these people quite often. Can you believe this? I'm like this, And this man was, preaching me and telling me he felt out of compassion that he had to tell me I was going to hell. That's what he said. Out of compassion, I have to warn you that you're going to hell. And I said to him, I don't feel you're respecting me. I practice ethical conduct. I try and generate loving kindness and altruism. If there's really a God like you think, would he send a person like me to hell? I'm living a good life. You're not respecting me. I mean, I really told him very squarely. And he was quieter after that. And then before we landed, he said something like, what did he say? Like, maybe I was a little bit too dogmatic or, something like that. I wanted to go, you bet. But I didn't. I was polite, But I really see that I have to be completely frank with these people. And if they're not being respectful towards me and my beliefs, I need to politely tell them, yeah, you're not respecting me, and I need to be respected. I did not ask to be converted. You need to respect. Yeah. Yeah. I think it is helpful to start out with some faith, but our faith is still, we may not understand everything in the Dharma, but we have faith in the little bit that we do understand. So for example, when I started out, I didn't totally understand rebirth. It made sense, but it's still, I didn't totally, emptiness was like out of my league. Yeah. But when the Buddha said that ignorance, anger, and attachment cause suffering, when I looked at my own life experience, that's true. Yeah. When I am full of greed and attachment, I suffer. When I'm angry, I suffer. When I'm ignorant, I make messes, I suffer. So that's initially what I understood. And because I understood that, I had faith. And that faith, I had faith based on some understanding. That faith gave me some mental space to listen to other teachings the Buddha gave with an open mind and really think about them. Yeah. And so then, I could listen when they talk about rebirth, and I could think about it some more, or they talk about emptiness and think about it some more. Yeah? So I think that faith and wisdom, they're both needed. Actually, it's not I think this. This is from Nagarjuna. I plagiarized. I should credit it. Yeah? So Nagarjuna says we need both faith and wisdom. Yeah? Faith gives us receptivity, so we listen to the teachings, we think about the teachings, we gain wisdom. As we have more wisdom, then of course we trust the Buddha more. For the teachings that he spoke that we don't quite understand so well. Yeah. Then, so we listen, with faith, we start thinking about it more, we gain understanding, so it goes back to the wisdom side. Having more understanding and wisdom, we have more faith. So do you see how the two things help each other? Okay, so
the first one seems to be
So the difference between the Hindu view and the Buddhist view of reincarnation, the biggest difference is that the Hindus say that there's a permanent soul, and the Buddhists say there is no permanent soul or self. That's the biggest difference. Then within that, some Hindus say that you're always progressing upward, whereas Buddhists say you can go up and down.